She had always loved the piano. From the time she could remember, her fingers had been drawn to the keys, tracing the black and white patterns with a gentle curiosity that quickly grew into skill. But despite her talent, she had never felt ready to perform in front of a large audience. Small gatherings at home or quiet school recitals were enough. Those settings made her comfortable, allowed her to express herself without fear of judgment. Yet now, she faced the biggest stage she had ever imagined. The grand hall loomed ahead, its towering walls and shiny wooden floor reflecting the lights that would soon shine down on her. The day had started like any other, yet it carried a weight she could not ignore. She had practiced tirelessly over the past weeks, repeating the same pieces over and over, making sure every note was perfect. Yet perfection had never been the goal before. It had been the quiet joy of music, the freedom to let her emotions flow through her fingers. But this performance was different. She had been told to play nothing ordinary, something that would make people remember her. That simple instruction lingered in her mind, a mix of inspiration and pressure. What did it mean to be extraordinary? How could she be extraordinary without losing herself in the attempt? She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the sheet music scattered across the floor. Each piece she had prepared seemed ordinary to her now, as if her mentor's words had cast a shadow of doubt over her efforts. She touched the keys of her small home piano absent-mindedly, letting her fingers wander over familiar melodies. But the notes felt restrained, lacking the spark that she imagined would be required to impress the audience. Her mind raced with questions. Could she really take a risk? Could she step away from what she knew and explore something new? Something bold? Her mentor had been clear. The performance was an opportunity to show her own voice, her unique style. Not just skill but character, emotion, and courage. The words echoed in her mind. Nothing ordinary. It was not a request for technical perfection or flawless repetition of old compositions. It was a challenge to find the music that lived in her heart, the music that could make strangers feel what she felt when she played. She had never thought about music this way before. For the first time, the piano felt less like an instrument and more like a mirror, reflecting her inner self for the world to see. As she packed her bag with sheet music and essentials for the hall, she felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She remembered the small recitals where applause had been polite, where no one's expectations had weighed on her. This time, every eye in the room would be on her, every ear attuned to each note she played. She thought of the other performers she had seen, confident and bold, their music flowing effortlessly across the stage. Could she ever reach that level? Could she find that same confidence inside herself? On the way to the hall, she kept her hands in her lap, imagining the grand piano waiting for her. It was not just the size of the instrument or the beauty of the stage that intimidated her. It was the idea that she had to fill the room with something memorable, something that would leave an impression. She had always believed that music should be a private conversation between the performer and their own heart. Now, it had become a conversation with hundreds of strangers. And in her mind, that made each note feel heavier, each pause longer. Once she arrived, the hall seemed even larger than she had imagined. The high ceilings and rows of empty seats stretched endlessly, waiting to be filled. A few early arrivals were setting up, checking instruments and arrangements, but most of the audience had yet to come. She could hear the faint echo of footsteps and the soft murmur of conversations bouncing off the walls. She felt a shiver of nervousness, a reminder that this was real, that the time for preparation was almost over. She walked to the piano, her steps tentative at first, then steadier as her fingers brushed the keys. The instrument was grand, shiny, and imposing, but it also felt alive. It seemed to invite her to explore, to push boundaries. She sat down and took a deep breath, letting her hands hover just above the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering every late-night practice, every small triumph, every moment she had felt the music in her soul. The room was silent, yet the silence was not empty. It was filled with possibility, with the chance to take something ordinary and transform it into something remarkable. Her mentor's voice came back to her in memory, calm yet firm. Trust yourself. Let the music come from you, not from what you think people expect. She repeated the words silently, as if they were a mantra. She understood that the challenge was not just technical but emotional. To be extraordinary, she had to let go of control and embrace vulnerability. That idea made her heart race and her palms sweat. She had always controlled her music, every note deliberate and measured. Now she had to risk imperfection, risk surprise, and risk the unknown. She began to play softly, testing the keys, letting her fingers find comfort in the familiar shapes. The sound was gentle, careful, almost hesitant. But even in those first notes, there was a hint of something more. A spark that suggested she could indeed step beyond the ordinary. She experimented with small variations, letting a note linger longer here, adding a subtle flourish there. The piano responded, the sound richer and fuller than she had imagined. She felt a thrill of discovery. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could rise to the challenge. As she practiced in the hall, imagining the audience watching, she began to feel a sense of purpose. Each note became a small statement, a piece of her own story. The fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had transformed into energy, a drive to push herself further, to explore the boundaries of her talent. She realized that being extraordinary did not mean abandoning herself. It meant revealing more of herself than she had ever dared before. Hours passed quickly as she rehearsed, adjusting tempo, exploring dynamics, letting the music flow naturally. She tried pieces she had never performed publicly, improvising melodies that felt raw and honest. The hall seemed to respond, the sound filling every corner, bouncing back with resonance that encouraged her to play louder, freer, more boldly. Each time her confidence grew, she felt a spark of excitement she had never experienced before. The thought of facing the audience no longer felt terrifying. It felt like an invitation to share something deeply personal and beautiful. As evening approached and the audience began to take their seats, she packed up her music and took one last look at the grand piano. She felt a strange mixture of anticipation and calm. The fear was still there, a reminder of the stakes, but it was tempered by the joy of possibility. She had discovered a piece of herself in the music, something that had been waiting to be expressed. Tonight, she would share it with the world. She stepped backstage, heart pounding, listening to the soft rustle of the audience settling in. Her hands were steady now, no longer trembling with doubt. She knew that the moment was almost here, the moment when she would take a risk and play something beyond ordinary. And though she could not predict the outcome, she understood one simple truth. Whatever happened, she would be true to herself and the music inside her. That thought brought a smile to her face, quiet but full of promise. As she prepared to step into the light and let her talent shine, she sat in her small dressing room, the quiet hum of the hall beyond the walls pressing against her thoughts. Her hands rested on her lap, but the memory of the piano's keys lingered under her fingers, as if she could still feel their smooth surface and the subtle resistance of each note. She tried to steady her breathing, but every inhale carried a rush of anxiety. The thought of stepping onto the stage, of filling the room with music that was truly her own, made her chest tighten. She wondered if she was ready for what she had promised herself she would do. Could she really take the ordinary melodies she had mastered and transform them into something extraordinary? Her mind drifted back to the countless hours she had spent practicing. She remembered the quiet evenings at home, when the world outside was muted, and the piano was her only companion. Those were moments of comfort, where mistakes were just lessons and perfection was never the goal. But now, perfection seemed to weigh heavily on her shoulders. She worried that if she faltered even slightly, the audience would notice and her chance to shine would vanish. She questioned herself in ways she never had before, asking if she had the courage to play from the heart rather than from the page. She recalled one particular evening not long ago, when she had tried something daring. She had improvised a melody that surprised even her. Her fingers had danced across the keys in ways she had not planned, and for a fleeting moment, the music had felt alive, almost as if it had a life of its own. That feeling had been intoxicating, a reminder of what was possible when she let go of control. Yet, she had been hesitant to repeat it in public, afraid that others might not understand, that it might be too bold. Now, with the hall waiting, she realized she could not afford to hold back. That spark had to be shared. She thought about her mentor's words again. Trust yourself. Let the music come from you. The repetition of this advice was both comforting and unnerving. How could she trust herself when every instinct screamed caution? She knew that playing safely would be easier, but it would not fulfill the promise she had made. She closed her eyes and imagined the piano before her, the black and white keys glowing under the stage lights. She pictured herself pressing down on them with confidence, letting her emotions guide each movement, allowing the music to flow naturally. It was a vision both thrilling and frightening. Her thoughts wandered to the small successes she had experienced before, the quiet nods of approval from teachers, the subtle smiles from family members when she hit a difficult passage perfectly, and the moments of complete immersion when she lost herself in the music at home. Those memories reminded her that she had talent, that she had something unique to offer. But the audience tonight was unfamiliar. They did not know her journey, did not know the quiet determination behind her practiced fingers. She had to bridge that gap, to let her music speak louder than her fear. She picked up her sheet music and studied it once more. The familiar notes seemed different now, as if they carried hidden potential waiting to be unlocked. She began to hum a melody softly, experimenting with variations she had never tried before. Each attempt felt like a small act of rebellion, a way of breaking free from the expectations that had held her back. Her fingers moved over the table of the dressing room as if it were a piano, tracing imaginary keys, testing rhythms, and exploring dynamics. The music was alive in her mind, and she felt a flicker of confidence begin to grow. The door opened briefly, and a stage assistant peeked in, giving her a gentle reminder that she would be called on soon. The words barely registered. She nodded, more out of habit than understanding, and returned to her thoughts. She could feel her heart beating faster, but it was no longer entirely fear. There was a strange excitement mixed in, a sense that something extraordinary could happen if she dared to take the leap. She realized that the moment she had been waiting for was not just about impressing the audience. It was about discovering herself, about finding the courage to be seen. She thought back to the ordinary performances she had given, the safe choices she had made. Each one had been pleasant, each one had been praised in its way, but none had captured the essence of who she was. That thought made her hands clench in determination. Tonight would be different. She would not merely play the notes. She would play the story, the emotions, and the heart that had carried her this far. The music would be a reflection of her inner world, a world that was vibrant, bold, and real. She remembered the first time she had truly felt her music move her. She had been alone in the living room, fingers stumbling at first, but then finding their rhythm. The notes had filled the space around her, resonating in a way that made her forget everything else. In that moment, she understood the power of music, its ability to transcend words, to speak directly to the soul. She wanted that feeling again, and she wanted the audience to feel it too. But she knew that to achieve it, she had to be brave enough to embrace imperfection, to let the music flow naturally rather than forcing it into a pre-planned mold. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, visualizing herself on stage. The spotlight would shine down, the audience would be waiting, and the piano would be her instrument of expression. She imagined the first notes escaping with a mixture of hesitation and confidence, growing stronger and more assertive with each passing moment. She saw the reactions of the audience, their surprise, their admiration, their emotional connection to the music. It was not about recognition or applause, she reminded herself, but about sharing a piece of herself, about creating a moment that would linger long after the final note. Her fingers itched to touch the keys again. She ran through scales and passages in her mind, testing transitions, imagining variations, letting the music take shape freely. She allowed herself to make mistakes in her thoughts, embracing them as part of the process rather than fearing them. The more she let go, the more alive the music felt, as if it were waiting to be born fully on the stage. She felt a sense of liberation, a release from the self-imposed limitations that had held her back for so long. The ordinary could no longer contain her. She needed to reach for something higher, something that truly represented who she was. Time seemed to stretch as she lost herself in her imagination, rehearsing not just the notes but the emotions behind them. She felt a growing confidence, a quiet courage that steadied her trembling hands and racing heart. She realized that the fear had been a guide, pointing her toward the boundary she needed to cross. Beyond the fear was the music that belonged entirely to her, waiting for the moment she would dare to claim it. As the minutes ticked closer to her cue, she stood up and stretched her arms, shaking off the last traces of doubt. She walked toward the door, each step a small act of courage. The stage awaited, and with it, the chance to transform her ordinary melodies into something extraordinary. She knew the path would not be easy, that the first notes might falter, that the audience might not immediately understand. But she also knew that the music inside her was worth the risk, that it had the power to move, to inspire, and to reveal the depths of her own heart. She paused for a final moment, taking a deep breath and closing her eyes. She felt the weight of anticipation, the excitement of possibility, and the quiet strength that had grown within her during hours of practice and reflection. She opened her eyes, ready to step into the light, ready to let her music speak in a way it never had before. Tonight, she would play nothing ordinary, and in doing so, she would discover just how extraordinary she could be. The hall was even more imposing than she had imagined. From the entrance, the vast space stretched before her, rows of empty seats fading into shadows at the far end. The walls were lined with polished wood, reflecting the warm glow of chandeliers above, and the grand piano sat like a centerpiece on the stage, waiting silently. She walked slowly, feeling the echo of her footsteps in the cavernous room. Each step brought a mix of awe and anxiety. This was the stage she had dreamed about and feared in equal measure. As she approached the piano, her fingers itched to touch the keys. The instrument was majestic, far larger than the one she had practiced on at home, its surface gleaming under the stage lights. She sat down and allowed her hands to hover over the keys, taking in their weight and texture. A low hum of activity came from backstage, and she could hear stagehands moving props, adjusting lights, and checking microphones. The distant murmurs of the audience beginning to take their seats floated faintly through the air. She could feel their expectations pressing down on her, but she reminded herself to focus inward, to channel all that nervous energy into the music that was waiting to come alive. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes briefly. The hall seemed to grow quieter as she centered herself, imagining the flow of music from her fingers into the air. Every note she had rehearsed, every melody she had improvised in private, every hour spent practicing and doubting herself had led to this moment. She felt a surge of determination, a quiet confidence that perhaps she could rise to the challenge. This was not the time to question herself, only to trust the music inside. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the beginning of the program. She could hear the announcer introduce the performers, and the applause for previous acts filled the room briefly before fading. Her cue was approaching, and she felt her pulse quicken. She flexed her fingers, letting the sensation of touch remind her of the countless hours spent on the piano at home. The familiar feel of the keys calmed her just enough, but the vastness of the hall still made her heart race. A stage assistant gave her a nod, signaling it was time. She rose and walked to the center of the stage, where the spotlight awaited. The audience had mostly settled, and she could sense the anticipation in the room. Some faces were eager, some indifferent, but all eyes would soon turn to her. She felt the first tremor of fear pass through her, but she forced herself to breathe deeply, focusing on the music she had prepared. Every step she took was deliberate, a conscious effort to project confidence even if it was still growing inside. She reached the piano and settled onto the bench. Her hands hovered just above the keys for a moment, as if gathering courage. The first notes were crucial. They would set the tone not only for the performance but for her own confidence. She closed her eyes for a second longer, letting herself feel the rhythm in her chest, the music in her mind. The hall was silent now, and even the faintest sound seemed amplified. She pressed down gently on the first key, and the sound rang out clearly, filling the space with a single, resonant note. Encouraged by the clarity of that initial tone, she began to play more, cautiously at first. The melody was familiar, each note precise, yet she allowed herself to stretch the tempo and dynamics slightly, adding touches she had only experimented with in her private practice. The music started to flow more naturally, the initial tension easing as she sank deeper into the performance. She could feel the room responding in subtle ways. The way sound bounced off the walls and echoed, carrying her music further than she had imagined. As the performance continued, her confidence grew. She remembered the mantra her mentor had given her, to trust herself, to let the music come from within. She allowed her emotions to guide her fingers, letting them move freely over the keys, creating moments of surprise and intensity. The audience was no longer just a distant presence. They became part of the experience, their attention in visible threads connecting to her music, urging her to reach higher, to play bolder. She experimented with dynamics she had never dared to use in public before, letting soft passages whisper across the hall and strong, cascading sequences sweep through it like a wave. Every pause, every accentuated note carried intention, emotion, and a sense of her own voice emerging more clearly than ever. She realized that the hall itself seemed to respond to her playing, amplifying not just the sound, but the feelings embedded in each phrase. She felt a thrill at this discovery, a deep connection to both the piano and the audience that made her forget the fear she had carried onto the stage. Midway through her performance, she stumbled slightly on a complex passage. For a heartbeat, panic threatened to overtake her, but she quickly reminded herself that perfection was not the goal. She allowed the slight deviation to become part of the music, seamlessly integrating it into her interpretation. The audience, absorbed in the emotion and flow of her playing, would not notice the error, but she noticed the triumph in overcoming it. That moment, she realized, was part of the journey toward something extraordinary. It was the courage to continue despite uncertainty. She leaned into the music fully now, allowing improvisations to flow naturally. She remembered the evenings she had spent alone, discovering melodies in the quiet of her room, experimenting with harmonies and rhythms that had felt too bold for an audience. Tonight, those bold ideas found their place in the hall, reaching every corner, transforming her ordinary practice into something unforgettable. The sound of the piano filled her with a sense of liberation, a feeling she had never experienced before on stage. The audience responded in subtle ways at first, leaning forward in their seats, eyes widening, a hushed murmur spreading as they sensed the energy and originality of her performance. She could not see everyone clearly from her position, but she could feel their engagement. The music she had feared might be too daring was connecting with them, stirring emotions she could almost feel flowing back toward her. That connection, intangible yet powerful, fueled her further, encouraging her to take risks she had once deemed impossible. She experimented with tempo, slowing passages to draw attention to delicate notes and accelerating sequences to build excitement. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, translating her emotions into sound. Every chord, every scale, every pause was intentional, part of a larger story she was telling through music. The hall, with its grandeur and silence, became a partner in her expression, amplifying her daring, her creativity, her newfound courage. As she approached the final segment of her performance, a surge of exhilaration carried her forward. She had discovered a rhythm that was entirely her own, a combination of technical skill and personal expression that transcended her previous limitations. She felt the ordinary slip away, replaced by a bold, vibrant, and compelling presence. Her music was no longer just notes on a page. It was alive, breathing through her, reaching out to touch everyone in the room. The final chords were striking and deliberate, each one resonating fully before fading into the silent anticipation of the audience. She held her hands above the keys for a moment, letting the last vibrations echo through the hall. The silence that followed was thick, filled with tension, as if the audience themselves were holding their breath, reluctant to break the spell she had created. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, it was scattered, small claps echoing through the room. But it quickly grew, swelling into a thunderous ovation that filled every corner of the hall. She could hear cheers, feel the energy of the crowd vibrating through the floor beneath her. Her heart raced, not with fear this time, but with exhilaration and relief. She had done it. She had transformed her ordinary melodies into something extraordinary, and the audience had felt it. She stood up, bowing slightly, her eyes glistening with a mix of pride and astonishment. The applause continued, a testament not only to her talent but to her courage, her willingness to trust herself, and her ability to take risks. In that moment, she understood that the journey to the stage, with all its doubts, practice, and quiet determination, had been as important as the performance itself. She had discovered a depth within herself, a part of her musical voice that would never be the same again. The moment she began to play in earnest, the hall transformed around her. Each note she pressed resonated with a vibrancy that seemed to lift the walls and fill the air with electricity. Her fingers moved with confidence, flowing effortlessly from one chord to another, blending precision with passion. She had finally let go of doubt, allowing the music to take over her completely. It was no longer a performance in the conventional sense. It was a conversation between her and the piano, a dialogue that reached every ear in the hall. She experimented freely, incorporating bold improvisations she had only dared to attempt in the quiet of her room. Rapid scales danced across the keys, followed by moments of gentle, lingering melodies that floated through the air like a delicate breeze. Every sound was intentional, carefully balanced between technical skill and raw emotion. The audience, initially silent and cautious, began to shift in their seats, drawn into the energy and passion emanating from her performance. The music demanded attention, and it held it firmly. She felt a thrill course through her as she realized the power of her own expression. For the first time, she understood that the piano was not just an instrument for her. It was an extension of her emotions, a way to speak without words. The fear she had felt before stepping onto the stage had melted away, replaced by a deep connection to the music and to the room itself. Each note was a declaration, each passage a story that only she could tell. She played with abandon, exploring contrasts of loud and soft, fast and slow, gentle and intense. The music became a living entity, unpredictable yet perfectly in her control. The audience reacted visibly, their faces reflecting surprise, admiration, and emotional engagement. Some leaned forward, captivated by her bold choice of melodies. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, experiencing the waves of feeling she had poured into each phrase. She could feel the energy bouncing back from the room, feeding into her performance, urging her to reach higher, to push further, to fully embrace the extraordinary. The hall became a partner in her artistry, amplifying not only the notes but the emotion behind them. Midway through, she introduced a section she had practiced countless times but had always played cautiously. Now, she let herself take risks, allowing improvisation to lead her fingers. The passage surged with intensity, the rapid succession of notes creating a thrilling sense of movement. Her body leaned into the rhythm, and she felt the music pulse through her veins. For a brief moment, she lost track of time, lost in the flow, utterly absorbed in the creation of something new and powerful. She knew that this was the essence of what her mentor had meant by playing nothing ordinary. She noticed subtle reactions in the audience. A gasp here, a small cheer there, heads turning toward each other in astonishment. The ordinary performances they had expected were gone. In their place was something alive, unpredictable, and deeply moving. The realization that she could touch people in this way, even strangers, filled her with a sense of purpose and exhilaration. Every note she played was a bridge between her inner world and theirs, a conduit for emotion that could not be spoken but could only be felt. She transitioned seamlessly into a softer section, allowing the hall to absorb the quiet beauty of her melodies. Her fingers lingered on the keys, coaxing out notes that shimmered like light on water. The contrast between the explosive passages and the delicate moments made the music even more compelling, keeping the audience fully engaged. She felt the story she was telling grow richer with each variation, more authentic, and more personal. The music no longer belonged solely to her. It belonged to everyone present, yet it remained a true reflection of her inner self. As the performance progressed, she began to feel a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. She experimented with tempo and rhythm, blending unexpected pauses with sudden bursts of speed. Each improvisation carried emotion, joy, excitement, longing, and wonder, all conveyed without a single word. She realized that her previous fear of imperfection had been unnecessary. The audience was not waiting for flawless execution. They were waiting for authenticity, for the courage to be seen and heard. And she was giving them exactly that. The final section of the performance was the most daring. She played with unrestrained energy, letting her hands fly over the keys, creating a cascade of sound that filled the hall completely. Every chord rang with clarity. Every scale flowed with purpose. The audience was on the edge of their seats, caught in the tide of her music. Some whispered in amazement. Others clapped spontaneously between phrases, unable to contain their admiration. She could feel the collective heartbeat of the room, an invisible rhythm that matched her own. It was as if the hall itself had become a living extension of the music she was creating. In those final moments, she allowed herself to take a risk she had been contemplating for weeks. A bold improvisation that deviated from anything she had planned. Her fingers danced across the keys in a pattern that was entirely her own, weaving unexpected harmonies and rhythms into the piece. The sound was exhilarating, both for her and for the audience. She felt a surge of triumph, knowing that she had dared to be truly herself, that she had embraced the challenge to play nothing ordinary. The risk had paid off and the energy in the room was palpable. She brought the piece to a close with a series of powerful chords that resonated through the hall, each one more deliberate than the last. The final note lingered, echoing as if refusing to fade, a perfect conclusion to the journey she had taken on stage. She held her hands above the keys for a brief moment, letting the silence speak, allowing the room to absorb the full impact of her performance. The quiet was heavy with anticipation, a pause before the inevitable reaction of the audience. Then came the eruption of applause. It started softly, a ripple of appreciation that quickly swelled into a thunderous ovation. She could hear cheers, see people standing, clapping with enthusiasm and joy. The energy in the hall was electric, a tangible recognition of her courage and artistry. She felt a rush of emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and exhilaration. Every ounce of fear and doubt that had accompanied her onto the stage was replaced with a deep sense of accomplishment. She had not only met the challenge but had exceeded it, revealing a side of herself that even she had only begun to understand. She stood and bowed, her heart still racing, her face flushed with excitement and satisfaction. The applause continued, echoing through the hall, a testament to the connection she had created with the audience. She realized that the experience was more than just a successful performance. It was a transformation. She had discovered a new depth within herself, a boldness that would carry into every future note she played. The piano had become a conduit for her expression, and the audience had responded not just to skill, but to authenticity and courage. As she stepped away from the piano, the realization settled in that she had crossed a threshold. The ordinary performances of the past seemed distant and small compared to what she had achieved tonight. She had embraced risk, let her emotions guide her, and found the extraordinary in herself. The hall had witnessed a moment that was uniquely hers, a display of talent, bravery, and heart that could not be replicated. And as she moved toward the edge of the stage, she knew that this experience would stay with her forever, shaping not only her music but her understanding of her own potential. The applause continued to echo through the hall long after her final note had faded. She stood at the edge of the stage, chest heaving, fingers still tingling from the intensity of her performance. The energy of the audience was almost overwhelming, a wave of admiration and excitement that seemed to lift her off the ground. She had faced her fear, embraced the challenge, and in doing so had discovered a part of herself that she had never known. Her heart swelled with a mixture of relief, pride, and exhilaration. She had played nothing ordinary, and the reaction of the audience confirmed that she had achieved something extraordinary. As she stepped off the stage, a wave of realization hit her. The music she had created was no longer just a sequence of notes. It was an expression of her courage, her imagination, and her passion. Every chord, every melody, every daring improvisation had been a piece of herself, shared openly with a room full of strangers. She understood that true performance was not about perfection or technical skill alone. It was about vulnerability, honesty, and the willingness to take risks. Tonight, she had embraced all of these qualities, and in doing so had transformed not just her performance, but herself. Backstage, her mentor was waiting, a proud smile lighting up their face. The briefest glance conveyed what words could not. A recognition of her growth, her courage, and her remarkable talent. She felt a surge of gratitude, knowing that their guidance had helped her reach this moment, even if the final performance had been entirely her own. The mentor's gentle nod encouraged her to reflect on the journey, to acknowledge the steps she had taken to arrive at this point. It was more than applause. It was validation of the risk she had taken and the authenticity she had shown. She walked slowly toward the dressing room, letting the excitement settle into a calm satisfaction. The adrenaline still buzzed in her veins, but it was tempered by a deep sense of accomplishment. She thought about the hours of practice, the doubts, the hesitations, and the fears that had accompanied her onto the stage. Each one had been a challenge to overcome, and each had been conquered. She realized that every struggle had contributed to the performance, that every moment of uncertainty had been a necessary part of the journey toward something truly extraordinary. Sitting quietly, she reflected on the audience and their reactions. Faces she had never seen, lives she had never known, had been touched by the music she created. That realization was humbling and exhilarating at the same time. The music had built a bridge between her world and theirs, an invisible connection formed by sound and emotion. She understood that this connection was the essence of why she played, the reason she had devoted so much of her life to the piano. It was not applause or recognition she sought, but the ability to move others, to convey feelings that words could never fully capture. Her thoughts drifted back to the moment before the performance, when she had been filled with fear and doubt. She remembered the tension in her hands, the racing of her heart, the uncertainty of whether she could truly rise to the occasion. Comparing that moment to the one she had just experienced, she felt a profound sense of growth. Fear had transformed into courage, doubt had turned into confidence, and hesitation had given way to expression. She had learned that the ordinary could be transcended by embracing authenticity and taking risks. That lesson, she realized, would stay with her far beyond this night. She recalled the improvisations she had allowed herself, the bold choices she had made in rhythm and melody. Each decision had been a step into the unknown, a willingness to trust herself and her instincts. The applause of the audience had been immediate and powerful, but the true reward had been internal, the knowledge that she had dared to be fully herself, that she had played with heart and soul. She understood that music was not merely a series of notes but a living expression of who she was, and that realization filled her with a quiet, enduring joy. The hall had become a part of the experience as well. The way the sound had traveled, the way it had echoed and filled every corner, had amplified not just the notes, but the emotions behind them. She realized that performance was as much about understanding the space as it was about mastering the instrument. The hall and the audience had responded to her authenticity, and that symbiotic relationship had made the experience unforgettable. She felt a deep gratitude for being able to witness this connection firsthand, for having the opportunity to create something that transcended the ordinary. As she changed out of her performance attire, she reflected on the journey that had led her here. Every practice session, every small recital, every quiet moment of exploration had built the foundation for what she had accomplished tonight. She had learned to embrace imperfection, to trust herself, and to let her emotions guide her. These lessons would shape every future performance, every note she played, and every opportunity she embraced. The journey was ongoing, but she had taken a monumental step forward, one that would define her growth as a musician and as a person. Stepping out of the dressing room, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. The applause from earlier still lingered in her mind, a reminder of the connection she had forged with the audience. She walked through the hallways, the echoes of the performance trailing behind her, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. Music had always been her refuge, her companion, and her passion. Now it had become a means of expression and connection, a way to share a part of herself with the world. She understood that this experience would influence not only her music, but also the way she approached challenges, risks, and opportunities in life. Her mentor joined her briefly, offering words of encouragement and reflection. They spoke about the courage it took to step beyond comfort zones, the importance of trusting oneself, and the power of authenticity in artistic expression. She absorbed every word, realizing that the performance had been more than just a display of skill. It had been a lesson in resilience, self-discovery, and the ability to inspire others. The impact of the evening extended far beyond the applause. It was a transformative experience that would shape her future in profound ways. Walking outside into the cool night air, she felt a sense of freedom and possibility. The performance was over, but its effects lingered in her mind and heart. She thought about the music she had yet to explore, the emotions she had yet to express, and the audience she had yet to reach. Tonight had shown her that she could rise to challenges, that she could embrace the extraordinary within herself, and that her voice, when fully expressed, could touch others in meaningful ways. The realization was empowering, and she felt ready to take the next steps in her journey with confidence and passion. She paused for a moment, looking up at the stars, feeling a sense of gratitude and wonder. The path ahead was full of unknowns, but she knew now that she possessed the courage and creativity to face them. Music was no longer simply a personal pursuit. It was a bridge to others, a means of connection and expression that transcended words. She felt a renewed commitment to her art, a determination to continue exploring, experimenting, and sharing her music with the world. As she walked away from the hall, she felt a quiet pride in what she had achieved. She had embraced fear, trusted herself, and created something extraordinary. The applause of the audience, while gratifying, was secondary to the internal transformation she had experienced. She understood that true artistry was about more than technical skill. It was about authenticity, courage, and the willingness to take risks. Tonight, she had embodied all of these qualities, and in doing so, had discovered a deeper understanding of herself and her music. She knew that the memory of this night would stay with her forever. Every time she played, every time she faced a new challenge, she would carry with her the knowledge that she could rise above fear, embrace the unknown, and create something extraordinary. The journey of music was ongoing, but she had taken a vital step forward, one that would shape not only her performances but also her life. She had played nothing ordinary, and in doing so, had revealed a side of herself that was bold, passionate, and unforgettable.